You've entered BOOKSTORM with Kristen Civiletto and me, Chris Storm. This is a podcast devoted to best-selling books that matter, books that make a difference. We're diving down deep with beloved authors about their stories. We're exposing hot-button topics and heartfelt themes, the issues that affect each of us in our own lives, as siblings, parents, partners, friends, as human beings. We're braving new ideas, fresh thoughts, hard lessons, and important truths. Those kinds of things that stay with us long after we turn the last page and close the book. Welcome back to BOOKSTORM Podcast. We have a special treat for you here today because we have a return author. We love our return authors. This means we doubly love your writing, and we're super excited about your latest book. We have Wade Rouse, also known as the beloved Viola Shipman. Welcome back, Wade.
Thank you for having me back. I really appreciate it. I adore you both, so it means the world.
We love you too, and you know what it means when you're back 2 times with BOOKSTORM, don't you? Maybe you didn't read the fine print. We can come over for dinner now whenever we want.
You know what? You're welcome anytime. It could be like a frozen pizza, but walk on in.
Well, you know I'm joking, although truly we'd love to. But we love Wade's writing. And for our listeners who also love Viola Shipman, or maybe you're new to this author, let me tell you a little bit about him. Wade Rouse is the internationally best-selling author of 9 books. They've been translated into nearly 20 languages. He chose his grandmother's name, which Kristen and I find so endearing, Viola Shipman. It's a pen name to honor the woman whose heirlooms and family stories inspire his fiction. No wonder it's such a huge success. Library Journal writes, Wade has hit upon the perfect formula to tell heartwarming, intergenerational family stories by weaving together the lives, loves, and history of family through cherished heirlooms. His books have been selected and received many accolades and endorsements and must-reads by places like the NBC Today Show, Washington Post, USA Today, Chelsea lately. He's always been also a 3-time Indie Next pick. Wow. And this is the one I love that I remember from last time. Wade was named by Writer's Digest as the number 2 writer, dead or alive, we'd like to have drinks with. And sandwiched between Ernest Hemingway and Hunter Thompson, which is really quite an honor.
Or a curse, yeah.
Wade likes to say his fiction is meant to honor the elders in our lives whose sacrifices and journeys helped make us who we are today. We love that. It honors all of our grandparents and those who came before us. Welcome back. So happy to have you.
Thank you very much. That was lovely.
Well, we're here to talk about Famous in a Small Town. This is your newest release. We absolutely loved it. And like before, we like to give a little bit of the background of the story. And I would love it, of course, if you want to jump in or add anything at the end. But your story, like some of your others, transports us to northern Michigan. And we meet Mary Jackson. She is 80 years old. And for almost all of her life, she has endured the steady invasion of tourists and influencers and real estate developers who have discovered this charming, beautiful town where she lives. And it's called Goodhart, Michigan. Now, this town is known for its cherries, and Mary is affectionately known by the locals as Cherry Mary. She operates a general store and a sandwich shop. It's kind of the hub of the town type place. And she's not quite ready to retire. She has been holding on to the hope that someday another woman will come along who will carry on the legacy of her general store, just like the generations of Jackson women before her. And this was conveyed to her when she was a child in a vision that she had. Now, Mary has a son, not a daughter, and a grandson. They live elsewhere. Now, we also meet Becky Thatcher. She comes to Goodhart, Michigan with her best friend. She had been there as a child and had some childhood memories there, but now she's a school administrator. She's turning 40 and she is at a crossroads in her life. As she works under Mary's wing for the summer, she's finding she's fitting into this beautiful community of locals. And she starts to believe that maybe destiny could be real because she thinks it's got something very special in store for her this summer. So that's kind of the backdrop. And did you want to add anything at all,
I
Reed?
would just, and thank you for sharing that. I'll, writers are always asked how we get our ideas. And this was a kooky kind of backstory to this novel. But I was on book tour in Northern Michigan, where this book is set. And it was a beautiful summer day and had events packed in, and was at lunch eating quickly. And I saw everybody around me having this great summer vacation time, enjoying a glass of wine. And I got a little jealous and tossed back one and ended up going to a place called Cherry Republic, which is, I talk about in the novel, but it's a real place, which is all things cherry in Northern Michigan, cherry coffee and chocolate covered cherries and cherry salsa. And there was an Olympic sized cherry pit spitting arena out there. And I thought, why not? And I spit a cherry pit and didn't go very far. But at the end of the arena, there was a placard that honored the founder of Cherry Republic's mother, who was named Mary. And supposedly Laura had it that she had spit the cherry pit the furthest in history there, and her record still stood. And that all kind of started going in my head, and went to my events, and then ended up, after it was over, walking the beach at Lake Michigan. And there's, as I talk about in the novel, I swear to you, this comes together, but there's a thing called Fata Morgana, which is when you look out on the horizon, especially in Lake Michigan, it's an atmospheric phenomenon, but you swear you can see Chicago floating in the distance, or Milwaukee, or a ship that's upside down, or people coming toward you. And I swore that I could see my grandmother coming toward me, and my mom. And it was a very strange, surreal. I knew I was, probably on my second glass of wine by then. And it was, probably not real, but I had all of these memories of growing up with my grandmothers at a log cabin and spending every summer with them. We used to put a watermelon in the creek, split it open for dessert. And we would spit watermelon seeds as a family. That's what you do in the Ozarks, what you did in the 70s. And all of these memories kind of came rushing to me about this character, and what would it be like if there had been a woman that had done something like the founder's mother had, that had never been done by a woman before, or maybe that society never wanted a woman to do before. And I thought of my grandmother, and what a difficult time she often had in our small town, being working poor and looking down on by many in our town. So all of these ideas started come together. So it was kind of a fascinating backstory of kookiness that kind of led to this novel.
Well, many of your stories bring together nostalgia, but also people pressing against tradition. And I think that's why you have such a wide array of readers, because it speaks to something in us. And I just love it. And I know we're going to dive in deep, and Chris will kick us off, but I just wanted to note that real quick.
Yeah, and I love it.
Thank you for saying, I was doing I do a podcast like yours called Wine and Words with Wade, and I had Robin Carr, who wrote Virgin River, who also endorsed this book. And she was talking just about the nostalgia of no matter what age we are beginning to kind of, despite all of the technology we have, hearken for something in our past that brings us especially comfort and safety. It could be a small town. It could be, Cherry Festival. It could be the general store that I write about, or it could be just, a summer day at the beach. So all of these, I think she's exactly right. I think you could be 18 or 88, and I think we kind of yearn for that simplicity a little bit more in our lives these days.
I agree.
Definitely. And that actually falls perfectly with my first question, because I wanted to say your books do something very special. They transport the reader to simpler times, happy places. You remind us that the very best moments in life are the smallest, the everyday, the ones that often go unnoticed. I love when Ollie says, my grandmother has always been a queen. Do you know how she got to be one? Simply by being herself. It's the hardest thing in the world for a person to do, be the unique individual God intended. And I wondered, as the writer of this beautiful story, why was this so hard for Mary in her early years, for Becky, and even for all of us in the real world? Are we all too worried about making everyone like us and not worried about whether we like ourselves?
First of all, you both asked the best dang questions in the world. You really do. That's a great one, and one I haven't been asked yet. I do. I think we put so much pressure on ourselves. It doesn't matter me being, coming of age in the Ozarks in the 1970s or a child today. We put so much pressure on ourselves to be liked and to be accepted. And it is natural. I mean, it is the way of the world that we just, to take the easy path is the way to acceptance. Sometimes standing out is very difficult. I hearken back to my grandmother and what a difficult time she had. I also hearken back to me growing up in the Ozarks in the 70s and what a difficult time I had. And much of the story was predicated by that difficulty, especially in Becky's, Thatcher's story. I didn't want people to know I was gay. I didn't want people to know that I was artistic. I didn't, I had a target on my back as a young kid then. And so I kind of buried all of that, to be the funny kid, to be the nice guy, not the smart one, just so my path would be a little bit easier. It wasn't until I got to college that I knew that I was failing myself. And I've spoken about this before. It wasn't until my mother, who was a hospice nurse, used to preach to me about, not living my life with regret. And so many people in their lives that she cared for with huge regrets, they weren't the people they wanted to be. They didn't do the things they wanted to be. They didn't say the things they wanted to say. And she used to beg of me not to do that. So kind of the starting piece for Becky's story was my story. I preach to young people, I preach to writers, I preach to artists that the most difficult thing to do in our lives is to give up that fear, to give up that need, that yearning need we all have to be accepted in this life and to be liked. Because that really doesn't get us anywhere. I mean, you look at the path that you two have taken to make BOOKSTORM so successful. I'm sure there were people along the way that told you, it's a dumb idea. It'll never go anywhere. Nobody will ever listen. And it takes incredible self-awareness to push all of that aside and to believe in yourself and to do what others tell you not to do. And foundationally, that is famous in a small town. You have a woman that is 80 that did something that she was not supposed to do, that kind of set her future in motion in good and bad ways. On the opposite side, you have a woman that never did anything. She was a good Catholic girl, like so many friends I have in St. Louis, Missouri, where she's from, who were told to, be a nice person, marry, have children, have that job, never leave it, don't do that. And she hits 40 and she's miserable, just like I was when I hit 40. That's when my first book was published. It takes a lot. I think there are kids that are in their teen years and early 20s that have that self-awareness that comes much earlier than it happened for me. I think there are some people that might be 80. I had a woman I've been working with that wants to be a writer in her 80s. It's just coming to her now. But it does take something deep within each of us that puts aside those naysayers that want to be liked and to please. And it's not easy to do our own thing. And, I truly believe that we cannot impact others fully in our lives, in our work, unless we are truly uniquely ourselves. You know, that ripple effect of goodness, of advocating for others makes a difference that we really don't ever see, but I guarantee you changes people's lives.
And maybe it's exactly what you're doing with your writing and your preaching to younger people. I think sometimes younger people need one example or one voice or one hand to hold to take that first step of courage. Could you just share a little in your personal life? What crossed you over? Was there a single event or a person, you said your mother, that gave you the strength to pursue the writing, pursue your dreams, and be who you were meant to be?
Oh yeah, you know, and I hate to keep talking about the same two people, but you know, my grandmother never finished high school, and yet she would yank me to the local library every single week and fill my arms with books, because she knew the importance that an education would make in my life. You know, a country kid in the middle of nowhere. She knew that I would read about and connect with people that I needed to see to show that there was a bigger world out there for me. Um, and my mother, you know, preaching to me not to let my life go by. You know, my grandmother always said, life's as short as one blink of God's eye. And you don't really, you know, you're always as a kid, you're like, okay, thanks, grandma, or, you know, great advice, mom. But I lost my brother when I was 13. And I think for me, that hit home much earlier and much harder. And yet I still didn't have the courage really to take that chance until I was about 39. And I remember my mother visiting with my husband, Gary. Now we've been together 27 years. And they both said, I was not happy in my career. I was doing well, but I was not happy. And they said, why don't you write a book? And I'm like, you know, is it that easy? And my mother said, actually, it is. You know, you can talk about it all you want. You'll talk about it till you're 95, having never done it, but you don't know until you do it. And I thought of my grandmother and um, what she couldn't do in her life, what she wasn't allowed to do in her life. Um, she didn't have options. She didn't have a dang option in her life except to work hard and love hard. And so I did. That really changed me. It was as much as just, you know, kind of stop whining about it and realizing that life is short and that if I don't honor the gifts I've been given, they'll go to waste. And so that changed me profoundly. And I really, you know, I always sound like a minister that gets up on a soapbox, but I do believe that. And I tell kids that today, you know, every single time I have the opportunity, or writers of any age, you just got to trust yourself and your heart and your voice. And that makes the difference.
Thank you for sharing that very personal story. We're very sorry for the loss of your brother. There is something about a funeral or aging that makes you take a good look at how fragile and quick life goes by. Wow, what a story. Thank you.
It does. It was, you know, there's a fascinating, I think it was Warren Buffett, who, you know, when he always has his annual conference, said, you know, what he tells young people is write your obituary and then go live up to it. What would you like it to look like at the end of your life? And then do that. And I love that. I think that's terrific.
Love it.
Yeah, I agree. Um, there's a lot of wisdom in what you just said, and also in some of the writing, but your metaphors were also a beautiful source of wisdom in your story. And I want to kind of zero in on one of those. There's one in particular that Mary and Ollie actually believed, and it was if you don't expel pent up emotion, especially negative emotion, the seed turns into a pit and it hardens in our hearts. And I was wondering how Mary or even Becky's best friend Q, who is such a big personality in the story, how would they suggest that we expel that cherry pit before it hardens us? And I was wondering if you thought it was easy to identify those pits in the first place.
Hmm. Such a great question. Well, first of all, you know, the the novel is, all things cherries. In the state of Michigan, where the novel is set, we are the cherry capital, especially in northern Michigan. I think about 80% of the world's cherries come from here. So, there is a fascinating history about the cherry industry and what it means. And I was fascinated with the fact, and I tried to do this, where you can take a pit and grow a cherry tree from it. Takes a while, but you can lovingly bring that to life. And when I did that, that kind of started a lot of these analogies. We grew up saying, they swept it under the rug. And I thought this was just a much more apt analogy, just this this metaphor that we all do have a pit within us. And sometimes it grows and grows and grows into something terrible. It's a hard thing to acknowledge weakness within ourselves, grief, frustration at those we love, being mad about how we grew up or were raised, anger at a spouse or a best friend. All of those things kind of get stuck in our craws, we used to say in the Ozarks, and you can almost taste it. I tried to look at what that pit looked like for both Becky and Mary and the story, and how we allow that to remain in ourselves for so long. And again, tried to hearken back to some of my own stories and how I let pits inside me grow. I came, as much love as I was given by my mother and grandmother. My father was a tough Ozarks guy, and so much of his dealing with loss or grief for me in life was simply saying, sweep it under the rug. It doesn't exist. He could mute when the St. Louis Cardinals were losing a baseball game. He could just mute the volume and walk away. And that's how he kind of handled life. And so I learned to do the same thing. Something bad, I would walk away from it. I gained at one time in my life about 120 pounds. And that's how I kind of buried that pit within me. It's hard to do, being honest with yourself, coming to terms with those issues in our lives is one thing that many of us are not good at. I think Americans are very prideful, and we can just soldier through anything and we won't ask for help. And that doesn't resolve anything. My husband went through AA and has been sober now for, 30 years. And one of his first things, the hardest thing of our relationship was his intense honesty, that nothing is swept under the rug, because that's how he got to the worst place in his life. Everything has to be spoken. You're mad, say it. You're upset, say it. You're not dealing with something, we're going to deal with it. And that was very hard for me to do. And it's very hard, I think, for a lot of us to be confronted that and be that emotionally transparent. So some of those kind of feelings I tried to bring through to the characters. Mary is someone that did something that wasn't expected. And life hasn't really turned out the way she thought it would. She's independent and strong, and yet she married an awful man, just like her mother and grandmother. That history kind of followed through. I think she feels like she's been a failure to her son and her grandson in many ways. Becky, the same thing, tried to please the entire world, her parents especially. And, that pit lodges until she finally sees who her longtime boyfriend truly is, and where her life is gone, which is not what she ever dreamed of. And it takes someone like her best friend, Q is based on one of our very best friends who's largely insane, probably should be, somewhere put away for a very long time, but is also so funny and so transparent and so honest that it kind of shocks you always into the moment. And that's what I wanted for both of these characters, was kind of to be shocked into the moment. And the piece of the book is, I always think we always have that one friend in our lives that we maybe didn't like in the beginning or think we would ever be friends with. that becomes part of our soul and forces us to look at ourselves in a new way and gives us strengths that we don't have so that we can move on to a new chapter in our lives. And, helps us expel that pit finally. And I'm not a person that believes in just walking away. I believe in dealing with issues in the past that have affected me, and trying to come to grips with those, with unconditional love and understanding. And I know that might sound very Pollyanna-ish, but I believe you can't get to the next point in your life unless you've dealt with a lot of the stuff that's come before you.
I love that. Many of your characters displayed exactly what you're talking about. I hear humility and humor and that willingness to be transparent. And look at those are things that I think feed our soul, and we need more examples of that. That's why we love your books and you personally, because you've shown that as well in your conversations with people, in your wine with Wade. Those are things that you are showing is just that humility and that refreshing willingness to say, let's talk about this. It's
Thank
pretty
you.
cool.
And I'm sure you two have had those same exact conversations, probably not only as friends and readers, but as you put Bookstorm forward. It can be very uncomfortable to have those very honest conversations, about what stays within us, but they're necessary and important.
Oh, yeah, we definitely do. Kristen and I, we don't hide anything. We talk about everything. Once Kristen said, you know what? She goes, I love it. And she started laughing. She goes, we're the yin and the yang. I said, I think we are.
Yeah, love that.
But I want to say to our readers, there are so many little bits of nuggets of wisdom in this book. If I had a highlighter, I could have gone every chapter with yellow. There's so many, but there's one I really loved. Just as Mary spits the cherry seed that will make her famous in a small town forevermore, she hears her grandmother's words, show them what you got inside you. And a pony says, your destiny is in your own hands. Envision the horizon, turn fable into reality, change history. Mary realizes it's the ordinary person who has to step into the light to be extraordinary, because we all sort of are ordinary. What did you instill within Mary that helped her to believe that even the most ordinary people have the ability to shine, that maybe we could take from?
That's a great question. I'll start here. When I wanted to write, when I was writing my first book, I used to believe, from my college years, even high school years on until I was in my 30s, that being an author was this special secret group that I think, I believed kind of ran around New York City and very fancy rooms and had, Cosmos or champagne. And and there was a golden key that was passed around to, anointed individuals that I would never be a part of. That's how I saw the world, that everybody was, I think, better than I was. Growing up, it was hard, and that's what I kind of felt in the world. Not easy to admit, and it was sad. It's a sad way to view yourself. It's a sad way to view the world. And in writing this book, I wanted people to understand that we're all ordinary, but we can do amazing things. It could be as simple as what my grandmother did, which was just shower me with unconditional love and tell me that I was safe. I mean, she saved my life. Just that ordinariness was extraordinary. It could be my mother caring for people at the end of their lives, driving all over the Ozarks to the middle of nowhere across dry creek beds and train tracks, telling people that they were safe and loved in the final weeks of their lives. She's an ordinary woman that did extraordinary things. Mary was a girl in the 1950s that did something that women were not expected to do. It's funny, when I broached this novel for the first time with my agent and my editor, who both of whom I've been with forever and I love to death, they both kind of had the icky, ooh, women, a woman spitting a cherry pit. It's not very feminine. It's not, and I'm like, that's the entire point. Doing something that we're not expected to do in societal eyes and doing it and winning. An ordinary person doing something. When you talk about the one quote, my grandmother was born and raised on a Native American reservation. And so she imparted a lot of wisdom to me that was lore. I talk about Fata Morgana and the kind of the images you see on the lake. My grandmother had some of those beliefs, along with her very strong faith as well. She had a lot of things that she was taught growing up that she imparted to me that were lore and legend, but that I found fascinating because they all surrounded ordinary people doing amazing things. And that's what it comes down to, is each of us doing things that we never expected that we can do, because that changes us and that allows us to change others. And it's the same way with Becky in this novel. She ends up doing things that she never dreamed 2 months earlier she could do, but it sets her life in a new path and in motion in ways that she never dreamed. I'm fascinated with, we always say ordinary people. I'm fascinated with those people the most. That's what I write about. I like people that life changes incredibly, but it does so moment by moment or hour by hour or day by day, because that's all of us. And I think we need to believe deeply in ourselves. That's what I've been using in a lot of the marketing for Famous in a Small Town, is be the legend you were meant to be. And it's fitting for Mary, it's fitting for Becky, it's fitting for Q in many ways. And I think it's fitting for every single person that wants to aspire to do something more. It doesn't take an Oprah. It doesn't take Jennifer Aniston or Reese Witherspoon. What it takes is you believing in yourself that you can do something.
Wow. Okay. So I'm just going to say personally, I needed to hear all of that. That spoke so strong to me. I'm getting choked up over here. Those are really good words. And if I needed to hear that so badly, I can only imagine how many other thousands of people listening to that needed to hear that message. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to go back to something that you alluded to earlier, and that is these voices that we hear as children. You've talked about that in your own family. We've all experienced that. Sometimes those voices shape your idea of who your partner should be, what career you should have, where you should live. I'm laughing in my head right now because my dad, when I was little, used to ask me, "What kind of lawyer are you going to be?" Not, "Do you want to be a lawyer?" So in my mind, I was always like, "I wonder what kind of lawyer I'm going to be," and went on to do that, of course. But those voices are very important, both positively and negatively. And we saw that in your story with both your characters and the generation before them. And I was wondering how you think young people can deal with the plethora of voices that they are hearing now through social media, through friendships, through so many different sources. How do they sort through which are the true voices? And where does destiny come into play? Because that's a big theme in your story as well.
I actually think it's harder now even than when I grew up. I had no social media when I was growing up, rotary phone, TV with rabbit ears, no cable, communication was, you had books, but communication was very limited. I mean, I was even on a party line, we did in the beginning, it'd be like, I think the amount of stuff that's coming at young people today and that they have access to is overwhelming, especially as they're going through their formative years. TikTok, I got sucked into TikTok, and I got an alert once that said you need to stop and go outside because you can just scroll forever. And it's pathetic to mention that, but I think of me being in my 50s thinking that versus, a 16-year-old, they see images, and back in my day, it was magazines or, TV that you saw. Today, it's constant imaging of how we should look, or our makeup, or our hair, or what we should wear, what we should do, sometimes being overly sexualized at a young age, dumbing yourself down to be liked. It breaks my heart sometimes, because as I scroll, I see some positive messages and some positive videos, but what are they? They're a tiny percentage compared to all the other stuff that's out there. And I get it. That's what gets attention. That's what gets views. That's what gets likes. But it is, I know, I have two godchildren, insanely hard on them. They're both juniors in high school, because they're just inundated with that. And if they're not the image that's given to them that everybody is accepting and aspiring to be, then they're out. So they fall into that trap of dressing the certain way or saying the same things. It's really difficult, because you talk about a pit, or forming an opinion of yourself at an early age, like you said. That's exactly what happened to me, and is what is happening to even my godchildren. My dad was an engineer. His brother was an engineer. So everything that I got was, I said I was going to major in communications. My dad said, you communicate every day, you don't make money communicating. That doesn't make any sense. I'm going to be a journalist. Well, you're not going to make much money being a journalist. I'm going to be an author. Nobody's ever an author. You're never going to make a penny. That's stupid. Same thing with, just me being accepted in life. You got to get married. You have to have children. That all of that did terrible things to me, because we want to make those we love most happy. We want them to be proud of us. And so we do those things because we want them to love us. I always go back to what my mother said: unconditional love. What is unconditional love? It's loving someone with no conditions. Hardest thing in the world to give and accept. I don't love you. I love you because, or I love you if. That's what most of us get in this life. I'll love you if you do it this way. And I'm not going to be so happy if you don't do it that way. And it happens to everyone, and more so to children today, with the information that they're getting on social media. And just this, this want to be accepted. It's really, really difficult to be your own person. But I will say this: when you look back, and I tell them this too when I speak to high school and college students, and sometimes it's crickets and sometimes it's applause, but you will look back at some point when you, hopefully not as late as in my age as I am, but just going along with the flow, or not being the person you were, you're gonna find yourself in a place that you're not happy to be. I used to be a PR director at an elite prep school, and I was there a very long time before I started my writing career. And I would see this happen from especially wealthy parents and grandparents who put their kids on a path from the age of 4. Junior kindergarten, they're going to be the next doctor in the family. We've always been doctors. They're going to be the next attorney. We're litigators. That's what they're going to do. The firm will be passed down to them. And I see these kids, you can see them struggle. I would watch them going from age 5 to graduation, going to Ivy League schools and excelling, but being miserable. Then I would see them return in their 20s for alumni events, maybe divorced, looking for career changes because they're not happy. I've honestly believed this: if you follow your passion and what calls to you. No matter what it may be, despite what anybody says, you are going to be the happiest person you can. That doesn't mean the richest. It doesn't mean all of the, social media acceptable things, but you will be a happy person. And when you're that person, makes the world around you happy. And people will deal with it. Your parents will come around to it. My dad was finally eventually proud of what I did, because he admired entrepreneurs. We're entrepreneurs at heart. That's what we do. He could see it from that angle. So long answer to your question, but it's a huge part of this book. People, you can even see it in Mary's son and grandson.
Mhm.
No matter what a good person she is and what a good mother and grandmother she tried to be, she had expectations for them that they could never meet. And so that impacted their lives in a bad way. And the grandson returns really wanting his grandmother to accept him, being a guy, being a man. But he became the person because of who she was, and she's kind of blind to that. So that's a vital message in the book.
Yeah, that came through loud and clear, and also underscored the importance of communication and that honesty and having that conversation they finally had that maybe should have been 10 years before. So, yeah, beautiful. Listen, I was at a commencement at the law school this week, and this is what people need to hear. These young people, they need this voice. And so I thank you for it.
Thank you.
It's been just an absolute, as always, pleasure talking to Wade Rouse, Viola Shipman. You love this discussion. You're going to even love this book even more. You've got to pick it up. Famous in a Small Town. And before we let you go, though, can you give us a clue about what you're working on next?
Yeah, Famous in a Small Town comes out June 13th. You can pre-order now. Just PS, we're doing a big $750 cherry giveaway with a cherry Coach bag and a bunch of stuff. So if you pre-order and email Gary at violashipman.com, you can enter that. Next up is a winter and Christmas novel called The Wishing Bridge. And it's set in Michigan, of course, in a real town called Frankenmuth, which is this beautiful, quaint Bavarian village on the northeastern coast of Michigan. And it surrounds a woman in her 50s that's a mergers and acquisitions expert who's about to get fired if she doesn't pull off one of her big deals because all the young up and comers are after her job. And so she kind of freaks out and tells her boss that she can convince her parents to sell their beloved Christmas store, which has become the world's largest, to a big soulless corporation. And she returns and kind of understands how and why her parents built this store, how much it means to them, how much the town means to her. It's a beautiful Christmas story. So super excited. That's out November 7th.
Oh, we can't wait for that one. Super excited about that. Thank you so much for joining us on BOOKSTORM. And I want to say to our listeners, you're going to want to connect with Wade. You can find him on Facebook. He has a live Facebook event every Thursday night, 6:30 Eastern.
Eastern, yep.
Wine and Words with Wade. And you can meet Gary on there quite often. And I got to say, I just love Gary too. You're the cutest couple. You work so well together. You should have your own show. It's just
Thank you.
adorable.
Thank
And
you.
you can also find Wade on Twitter and Instagram. Thanks for joining us. Always fun. Can't wait to have you back.
Thank you for having me. You two are the best.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness. Like, I just needed to hear what he had to say. He always comes on and says something that gets my heart. So I get like a little teary-eyed. Like, these are things that not even our youth needs to hear, but we still, even today, I love talking to him. There were so many other nuggets I wish I could have brought up. I kind of want to talk about this one. Mary's grandmother said, everybody has storms in their lives, Mary. You have to be patient enough to wait them out and smart enough to understand their significance. And Wade talked about this a little too. He said, follow your dream, follow your passion. You're going to be happy. It doesn't mean life's going to be perfect. We're in the midst of a world here. We are speaking and engaging with other people. There's outside forces beyond our control, and we're going to hit some storms. So what do? Thank you, Mary's grandmother, for saying, just wait it out. This too will pass. And how are you going to use it? How are you going to learn from it? How are you going to be stronger? I know maybe it sounds cliche, but that hit me.
Yeah, especially when I think about, oftentimes young people or people who've given up hope, they don't understand that there is a way through, that there is a light at the other end of that tunnel. And that's the one thing, whenever I hear about people who have given up, I just want them to see that bigger picture, right? Because you're right, we all have those storms and they keep on coming, but there's living through them and learning and becoming more and more of who you are meant to be. And that's one of the things I love about all of Wade's books as Viola Shipman, because there's always this underlying theme of emerging through that storm with a better understanding of who you are, what you do well, and what you love.
Mm-hmm. And also how it always takes place in a small town is very special because it's so intimate. And Becky's grandpa says this, I love this so much. Sometimes you just got to watch the sunset, crawl into the sandy sheets exhausted and grateful for a beautiful, perfect summer day. That's all we have. These little moments in life. Time is but a wave. And it strikes me so often, I do this purposefully. Something little thing good will happen. And I make myself stand still a minute because life rushes by. And I sit a minute and just a second and I say, this moment right here and now, this is great.
Yeah,
and it doesn't have
locked
to be
in.
anything good. It could be a sunset, like Becky's grandpa says. But we got to slow down a little bit and enjoy these little tiny little things.
My dad always used to say, a day when nothing happens is a good day. And when I was young and he said that, I'd be like rolling my eyes because I'm like, I want excitement. I want to get out there and do stuff. But now I fully appreciate the value of what he said. And it's good. Now, let me ask you, this takes place in a small town, famous in a small town. And have you ever lived in a small town? Have you ever had that experience where everybody's
No,
kind of famous in a small town?
no, but right now I just want to log on that song by John Mellencamp and play it. How's it go? I can breathe in a small town.
Yep.
We all love it. No, I mean, yes, I grew up in a suburb that was part of a bigger city, but not a small town. But I'm going to give a shout out because I have a lot of cousins who live in Kane, Pennsylvania, tiny little Swedish town in the Allegheny Mountains. And a lot of them wouldn't leave it for the world. So yeah, I do think, I'll give you an example. I ordered funeral flowers and I called the little florist and I said, I've got to order funeral flowers. She knew exactly who had passed away. She knew exactly where to deliver them. And she didn't charge me. I said, well, don't you want my charge card? No, I'll bill you later. I'll call you later. I'm going to send you a picture of the photos, see if you like it first. And then weeks later, she sends me a PayPal thing. And I thought, there's something beautiful about that. Everybody knows everybody. You're held accountable. It's more trustworthy. What is it about a small town?
Yeah, I think your reputation is very important. And of course, there's downsides. People are up in your business, but there's maybe a little bit of good peer pressure in terms of how you want to conduct yourself and how your family would be known. I grew up in Niagara Falls. It was a fairly small town at the time, and actually is now again. And I remember how important everybody's family, it was always, who's your family? Who are your people? And if I meet people anywhere outside of Niagara Falls to this day, across the world, the first question is usually, well, who's your family? And it just shows you how important, that reputation is. And I know the characters in this book were all kind of circling around that reputation for different things. And they were kind of bucking against it or embracing it. But all of that is, I think, part of living in a small town.
And there has to be a huge comfort level when you go to sleep at night. So you picture yourself in your house, all your neighbors, everybody, street after street after street. You walked those streets since you were little. And it must be, I've had that feeling in different neighborhoods that I've lived. I know everyone for miles around. And same as Becky in this story, when she moves to the small town, can't find herself and decides, I can't say that spoiler, but she decides she loves it. There's some good thing. Here I am, a New York City lover, admitting there's something good in a small town.
Never thought I'd see the day.
So listeners, thanks for joining us. Let me leave you with a few storm predictions. We have a very long list here. I'm going to rattle off because you are going to love what we have coming. Madeline Martin, The Keeper of Hidden Books. Bryn Turnbull, Paris Deception. Katie Quinn and JD Chang, The Phoenix Crown. Matthew Quirk, Inside Threat. Marie Benedict, Victoria Christopher Murray, The First Ladies. We have Ashley Audrin, The Whispers. Fiona Davis, The Spectacular. Sandra Brown, Out of Nowhere. Greg Hurwitz, The Last Orphan. And very special treat, our first children's book that is very important, Tiffany Hammond, A Day Without Words.
Oh, I can't wait to talk about all those. Well, listeners, you heard how we're growing. It's because of you. You're sharing our social media. We just love the fact that we have these authors on that you're responding to. This is the fiction you're reading, so we're very excited to talk about it and to be here. We just ask that you stay on the radar with us. Go to bookstorm.com or bookstormpodcast.com. You can find us on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, and on TikTok. And of course, if you go to YouTube, you can see us talking with our authors on the screen. And you can find us by Bookstorm and Podcast. You can search it, we'll come right up. Until next time, one of the best ways to brave the storm is to dive down deep into life-changing fiction.